Movies have been made from stories like this one. During World War II, Germany took over France. For information that saves lives, a young French woman goes behind enemy lines to spy on the Nazis. Nazis tortured and killed female spies, which happened in the shadow of the horrifying violence of World War II. Because these women were so brave and determined to reach their goals, they put up with terrible violence that showed how evil the Nazis really were. The Nazis tortured female spies in many clever ways and even put some to death. Here are 10 horrible things they did. Medical procedures. The horrifying medical treatments that were given to female spies who were caught are a particularly dark part of the history of Nazi crimes. The Nazi government did these horrible things without the people involved permission and with little regard for their lives. They are among the worst crimes they ever did. Many of these horrible treatments were done in the name of medical study, which was really just a cover for a bunch of cruel and horrible methods. Some of these were being exposed to dangerous drugs, having invasive surgeries, and getting diseases on purpose. One operation that was especially scary was the so-called sterilization trials. These were meant to make a good method for sterilizing a lot of people, with women as the main targets. The techniques that were tried often caused unbearable pain, serious damage to the insides, or even death. Another frightening experiment was the hypothermia experiment, in which prisoners, including female spies, were submerged in ice water or very cold water for hours at a time. A lot of the people who took part in these studies did not make it. The purpose of the studies was to find out how the body reacts to being too cold. People who did often suffered physical hurt that didn't go away. The Nazis also did tests on viral diseases to see how diseases like typhus, tuberculosis and malaria spread, and to see how different treatments worked. Women were put in these situations on purpose, but the people who were put through these tests often didn't get any medical care, which was the same thing as giving them the death penalty. Medical ethics rules like beneficence or informed consent were not at all taken into account when these horrible treatments were done. They were carried out by doctors and nurses who said they would not hurt anyone but did horrible, evil things. Even though these treatments hurt their bodies and minds, many female spies kept their cool and energy even though they were being treated so badly. They turned to each other for comfort, sharing their worries and hopes and hanging on to what made them human. Some were so brave that they messed up tests or secretly told others about the horrible things they had seen. What the Nazis did to female spies in terms of medical care was one of the worst violations of human rights during this terrible time. They stand for a shocking lack of respect for human life and a breach of medical ethics. Manipulation and propaganda. There were many tools that the Nazi government could use, and one of them was controlling information. The Nazis also used this kind of calculated abuse on female spies that they captured. Many of these brave women were used by the Nazis as props in their complicated propaganda schemes. Their stories and pictures were changed to fit the government's twisted stories. The Nazis did bad things like calling these women spies, rebels and saboteurs, and saying they were a big threat to both the German people and the Nazi government. This picture, which was carefully made up, was meant to justify their cruel treatment and, in many cases, death. It was so scary that it made Germans fearful and hostile toward foreigners. It was unfair to insult and belittle these women who had put their lives at risk in the fight for freedom. It was the Nazis' sick plan to twist their stories to further their own evil goals. Also, these women were used as props in propaganda that said the Nazis were cruel and impossible to stop, which made their enemies feel even more afraid and useless. A lot of the time, the government lied or made up stories to show how good they were at finding and punishing spies. Psychological warfare was used against both the Allies and the resistance groups. It was a powerful way to spread doubt and hopelessness. When the Nazis caught spies, they made them do fake public interviews or radio shows. In some very bad cases, these women were forced to praise their attackers or insult their home countries. They were constantly scared of being tortured, which was used to write down and get their thoughts. The goal of these dishonest plans is to break down the resistance group's spirit and make these women look bad in the eyes of their people. However, a lot of female spies were very tough and didn't let themselves be used as propaganda agents. Even with these smart moves, some people were able to secretly stop Nazi propaganda by adding hidden messages or double meanings to the reports they were forced to make. Some people were able to stay calm and defiant even when they were being shown off to the public. The use of female spies as propaganda tools by the Nazis shows that they had a complex plan for fighting that went beyond the battlefield and into people's minds. Execution. People who fought in the resistance, including spies who worked against the Nazis, were often put to death in the dangerous and unstable world of World War II. A lot of brave people gave up everything during the war to fight the Third Reich's dictatorial goals. These brave people often went on dangerous tasks because they felt a strong sense of duty, patriotism, or moral necessity. They knew that if they were caught, they would be put to death, which was the punishment they feared the most. During World War II, resistance fighters and spies were killed in a number of different ways, which shows how cruel and effective the Nazi government was. To carry out death penalties, people were shot, hung, and even put to death by the famous guillotine. The goal of these actions was to get rid of threats, spread fear, and stop other people from joining the rebellion. The Nazis put on a show of authority to explain why they were killing people. People were put on trial and sentenced to death for spying, sabotage, or other actions seen as harmful to the Nazi war effort. Often, these people were not given a fair trial or due process. These legal excuses made the killings look like they were legal, but they were often just a way to get revenge or cause fear. Many female spies were killed, like Noor Inayat Khan, a British agent with Indian and American roots who was caught by the Gestapo in 1943. Even though she was questioned very closely, she refused to give up details about her network. She tried to get out of jail several times, but each time she was caught, her sentence got longer. It is thought that she didn't tell the Germans anything useful because they only knew her by her secret name, Madeleine, and didn't know she was Indian. At the Dachau concentration camp, she was killed. Khan was given the George Cross after she had died for her bravery. The lives of Sophie Scholl, her brother Hans, and other White Rose members were taken in 1943 because they put up anti-Nazi posters and papers at Munich University. Many people saw their brave actions and final deaths as a sign of resistance against the Nazi government. Violette Szabo was a British spy who was caught by the Gestapo in 1944 while she was on a mission in France. The Gestapo found Philippe Lever's resistance network in the Rouen area of France in April 1944, while she was there on her first trip to France. She worked as a courier for him. Violette's job was to get in touch with network members and stay in touch with them while getting important information. The day after D-Day, on June 7, 1944, she started her second flight. She, Liua, and another spy jumped out of a plane and went to Limoges, France, to set up a new network with rebel groups there. A resistance leader named Anastasie and Violette were on a messenger trip when they ran into German soldiers. 3 days later, their car was stopped at a traffic light, which led to a shootout. While Violette was being held captive, she helped Anastasie get away. Violette was questioned hard in the Frayne jail in Paris before being sent to Germany by train. During the trip, British planes bombed the train, and Violette and another female prisoner took the chance to bring water to the male prisoners, even though it put them in great risk. In the Ravensbrück prison camp, she was killed. It was later shown in the movie Carve Her Name with Pride how brave and selfless Szabo was. People who stood up to the Nazis during World War II and died for their bravery came from a wide range of backgrounds and did a wide range of things. Humiliation. One important part of the Nazi regime's psychological warfare against captured female spies was making them suffer public shame and degradation on purpose. The goal of these actions was to break the women's emotions, lower their self-esteem, and make other people see them as less human. Not only did it hurt and embarrass the women emotionally, but cutting their heads against their will was also a very humiliating public act. Hair is very important to many cultures and individuals. It often represents femininity, beauty, and one's own personality. The Nazis tried to take away these important parts of female spies' identities by cutting off their hair, making them inmates, and making them less unique. Female spies were often stripped naked in front of Nazi officials and other prisoners, and their heads were shaved. This obvious breach of personal honor was meant to make the women feel very bad about themselves and cause them a lot of stress, which would make them even less respectable. Public beatings were another horrible way of degrading people. A lot of the time, female spies were publicly beaten and made to feel bad about their bodies. These horrible shows did two things. They punished the person who did it, and they also sent a scary message to other inmates, which increased the Nazis' power and control. Additionally, female spies were frequently forced to do degrading work, most of which was simple. They might have to scrub floors, clean toilets, or do other simple jobs while being closely watched by those who have captured them. The women were made to work hard against their will so that they would feel like slaves and lose even more self-esteem. Even though they were severely criticized and put down, many female spies showed incredible strength and endurance. They helped each other by talking about their pain and realizing that there was power in numbers. Some were even able to use the humiliation they felt to do things that showed they didn't agree. They used the attention they got from the public to send secret messages, boost the spirit of other prisoners, or weaken the grip of their captors. The Nazis' cruel use of public shame and degradation as a tool shows how little respect they had for people's worth. That being said, it does show how brave and strong the female spies were. These women refused to let their attackers break their spirits, even though they were being treated very badly. They got strength from each other and from their unwavering commitment to their cause. They turned their problems into strong acts of defiance and resolve. Brutal interrogation. When a female spy first talked to her Nazi handlers, it was often the start of a nightmare. The Third Reich was known for torturing prisoners in horrible ways that were meant to break their spirits as well as get information. From the worst forms of mental torture to the worst forms of physical abuse, and finally the worst forms of cruelty, these interrogations went in a very bad order. The Nazi interrogators were very good at mentally hurting people. They wouldn't let their prisoners sleep, would lock them up for long periods of time, and would make scary threats against their families. The goal of these techniques was to weaken the subject's mental defenses and make them more open to sharing knowledge. The spy would be questioned more deeply and more horrifyingly if they refused to answer. It was shockingly normal to see physical violence at these meetings. It was normal for women to be beaten badly, whipped, and hurt physically in other ways. To make their subjects suffer, interrogators often liked torturing them with simple tools like clubs, whips, or even just their own hands. Surprisingly, the victims were questioned without any care or medical treatment, leaving them in constant pain. One scary method used was the concentration test, in which the prisoner had to stay still for long amounts of time. It would be very bad to make even the tiniest movement. The prisoner often passed out because they were so physically and mentally tired, which was then followed by more physical abuse. Other times, scary things happened. Female spies were put through fake deaths to see how mentally strong they were. There were fake hangings where the noose was cut off right before the execution and firing squads that missed their shots on purpose. Often, these events left psychic scars that would last a long time. Many female spies were very determined not to tell their secrets, even though they were being hurt very badly physically and emotionally. In response, their kidnappers used even more cruel and degrading methods, such as burning and electric shocks, to hurt them even more. When they were being questioned in such cruel ways, these strong women showed an amazing amount of strength and resilience. While there are probably millions of records about the horrible torture and violence the Nazis did, there aren't that many pictures that show how their victims suffered. If a strange picture showing how badly Nazi soldiers treated the female spies they caught goes viral, it's going to go viral. The picture looks like it was made by AI, but let's be honest, it only gives us a glimpse of what the brave Allies spies had to go through. People who were locked up in Nazi camps and jails thought that physical torture was the least bad. They came up with a lot of clever ways to make their captors less human, especially the medical experiments that the Nazi doctors did. Will be remembered as the worst event in history. It gives us chills to think about what these brave women spies went through at the hands of Hitler's army. We definitely would not have been able to handle the abuse today, but these women did. They put up with it and were ready to die, but they never gave up their country's secrets. Forced labor. Nazi female spies were often sent to work in prison camps, where they had to go through terrible conditions. So, their scary story didn't end with being questioned violently. It is well known that these concentration camps had horrible living conditions and prisoners were treated very badly. They were an important part of the Nazi regime's plan to kill all Jews. As a result, these women were often forced to do dangerous, physically demanding work in places that were meant to make them tired and hurt. As part of their jobs, they often had to do hard physical work in industries like mining, building, and manufacturing. It was expected of female prisoners to use dangerous tools, carry heavy loads, and work in unsafe places. These tasks were often done when the weather was bad, which made the prisoners' pain and suffering even worse. Not only was the job physically exhausting, but it was also often pointless and embarrassing. The Nazis sometimes made the prisoners do Sisyphean tasks, which were named after the Greek mythical hero who was forced to roll a boulder uphill forever. These pointless jobs could include moving big rocks around without a reason or cleaning up areas that are already spotless over and over again. This useless work did two things. It took away the prisoners' pride and made them less mentally tough. But even though the work was humiliating, many women found quiet ways to protest. Some of them tried to sabotage the work they were supposed to do, aiming to slow down production or damage machines on purpose. Others found comfort in their friendships, which helped each other get through the terrible conditions and even helped them plan secret acts of resistance inside the camps. If inmates didn't meet the arbitrary goal that their captors set for them, they would be in trouble. As punishments, people were beaten in public, put in cells, or given less food than they were already getting. These extra cruel acts added to the physical and mental pain that these women already felt every day. People who were forced to work in concentration camps went through terrible pain and humiliation. This must never be forgotten. But it's also important to remember how tough and brave the female spies were who were caught in these scary situations. As shown by their unwavering commitment, they were brave and unshakable in their commitment. Their unwavering determination to fight back and their amazing will to survive the inhumane conditions and never-ending forced labor in the concentration camp are scary reminders of how cruel the Nazi government was. But the stories of these female spies' determination and bravery in the face of terrible hardships serve as a light of strength, showing how strong the human spirit is in the face of unimaginable tragedy. Inhumane living conditions. The Nazis kept female spies as prisoners, where it was an ongoing battle to stay alive in horrible conditions. As soon as these women were captured, they were thrown into a world of constant fear, sickness, and abuse. The Nazi government was very cruel and often broke basic rules of human rights and respect. A lot of female spies were locked up in concentration camps with other prisoners who had to deal with the horrible crimes of the Nazi government. The fact that these camps were overcrowded and prisoners were kept in barracks that weren't fit for people gave them a bad name. It was easier for infections to spread quickly because there wasn't enough room, and basic things like beds and personal items weren't always available. Few prisoners had access to clean water and toilets, so health conditions in these camps were terrible, which made it easier for diseases to spread quickly. When baths were available, they were often used to make people feel bad instead of to clean up. As slaves, women were forced to take off their clothes and bathe in public. Food was hard to come by, and most of the time what was available was bad or couldn't be used. A lot of female spies had to survive on old bread and soup that was too watery, which made them malnourished and more likely to get sick. The Nazis cruelly used food as a way to control people. They would take away people's meals as a way to punish or force them to do something. Even though they were being abused non-stop, these strong women were able to fight back and keep their humanity. Within the walls of their barracks, they shared songs and stories and even taught each other by making classes out of nothing in the middle of nowhere. Because their captors were so cruel, their acts of kindness and humanity stood in sharp contrast as they took care of the sick and comforted those who were sad. The way the Nazis treated female spies while they were in their custody shows how little they cared about human life and respect. It is a sad memory of how much pain and suffering these women went through. It also shows how tough and resilient they are to an extreme degree. Even though things were terrible, they kept their dignity, fought hard to stay alive, and sometimes found moments of understanding and compassion in the middle of the complete despair. Chemical experiments. One of the most terrifying things about the Nazi regime's crimes was how little they cared about human life, as they ruthlessly worked to make biological and chemical weapons. They often didn't know these horrible tests were going on because the women spies the Nazis caught were being used as test subjects. The sterilization trials, which were meant to find a quick and cheap way to sterilize large groups of people that the Nazi government thought were unwanted, were some of the worst things that have ever been done. Female spies and other prisoners were subjected to a wide range of procedures, often without anesthesia, which caused them great pain, major health problems, and eventually death. These horrible things happened to these women and changed them forever. Their bodies were abused in the vicious desire for Nazi dominance. The Nazis also did tests that killed people with chemicals like sulfonamide and mustard gas to learn more about how these dangerous drugs worked and to look for possible treatments. Women were hurt on purpose by having their skin cut or burned. It was unbearable to go through these cruel trials. People got infections, suffered terrible pain, and in too many cases died painfully. Injecting phenol was yet another cruel way to test something. The prisoners were given these deadly injections right into their hearts, probably to see if they were ready to die quickly. A lot of female spies were used in the experiment, and they all died in agonizing pain as their bodies violently responded to the chemicals that were meant to kill them. Even though they went through horrible things, many women were able to keep their humanity and unbreakable spirit. Many of them even risked their lives to get proof of these horrible crimes, or to keep other prisoners from being picked for tests. The fact that they were able to do these brave and heroic acts in the middle of constant fear and pain shows how strong and brave they are. The terrible things that these women have done are a sad reminder of how far people will go to be cruel and evil. For it also shows the amazing bravery and determination that the human spirit is capable of. These women kept their humanity and honor even when they were being horribly exploited. Their amazing spirit has inspired and amazed people all over the world. Forced betrayal. There was a lot of intrigue, lying and high-stakes maneuvering in the area of espionage during World War II. On both sides of the war, the art of infiltration and betrayal was one of the most sneaky problems that intelligence agencies had to deal with. The Nazis were very good at lying and tricking people, and they were especially good at turning spies against their own kind. This created a dangerous web of double agents that caused a lot of trouble in the Allied and rebel networks. In conquered Europe, the Nazis set up a large spy network that was run by their military intelligence services, the Sicherheitsdienst and the Abwehr. They hired German and non-German agents and taught them how to get into resistance groups and Allied spy networks. They quickly learned, though, that one of the best ways to get information was to use their own spies' weaknesses against them, which led to a dangerous game of double-cross. When the Nazis caught female spies, they would often threaten their own lives or the lives of their loved ones if they didn't participate. The Gestapo told people that if they didn't work with them, they would hurt or kill their family members, friends, or other resistance members. Nazis would sometimes lie about giving people amnesty or letting them go. Female spies who are desperate to get away from their problems might believe these lies for a short time before realizing they were tricked. This is how they got their own spies and leaders to turn on them. There were trained Nazi intelligence agents who could spot double spies among their own people. Officers sometimes used threats, coercion, or money to turn spies into double agents, causing them to keep working for the Nazis while giving false information to the people who were supposed to handle them. The Nazis would get into intelligence and resistance networks by sending their own spies to work there or changing the way activities were done. They would get important information about planned activities, codes, and contacts that they could then use against the Allies. Brainwashing. Brainwashing was a form of evil psychological warfare used by the Nazi regime. In addition to torturing them physically and living in horrible conditions, this horrible act, which was meant to control and influence the female spies that the Nazis captured, pushed their minds to the limit. The process of brainwashing often began as soon as the person was caught, using disorientation techniques meant to throw off their balance. These methods, all meant to make people feel weak and unsure, included locking people up alone, moving them around a lot, and not knowing when they would be questioned. Nazis often used trained psychologists and propagandists to do the harsh interrogations that were a big part of training. They took advantage of the prisoners' mental weaknesses by giving them false information, making threats and other tricks. It was meant to make them feel guilty, scared, or uncertain, so that their mental defenses would be weaker and they would be easier for the Nazis to control. Forced self-criticism was another popular method. Female spies had to say sorry for what they did, question what they thought, and even thank the people who held them hostage. They were meant to lose their sense of self-worth and individuality through this cruel method, which turned them into tools for the Nazi government. Because they were being manipulated in this way, the female spy's mental health was badly affected, showing up as anxiety, sadness, and even dissociation. Some women had what is now known as Stockholm Syndrome, a mental condition in which inmates form an emotional bond with their captors as a way to stay alive. But a lot of women were able to fight off this strong psychological attack. Even when they were being questioned by the Nazis, they would mentally withdraw, hold on to their most important beliefs, or come up with sneaky ways to fight back, like pretending to follow while quietly stopping Nazi plans. In the face of so much mental pain, their resistance is a powerful testament to their mental strength and determination to stay true to who they are. Brainwashing was an evil method used by the Nazi government to control people's thoughts and weaken their will. The mental suffering these women went through was just as bad for them as the physical abuse they were given. But the fact that they were able to fight back, keep their identities, and live despite all chances is a great testament to how strong they were, mentally and physically. We hope you liked this video. Watch another video here.